Welcome to Ready, Set, Hunt. Whether you're an aspiring, new, or seasoned hunter, join us as we share our experiences and learn from other hunters around the country. Can't stop me. When I hit record, it's go time. Just like now. We're live.
And we're back.
And we're back.
Another episode with Peter and that guy named Chris.
You know, and this episode has a fun title. Different title. A lot of our titles have been fairly bland for the most part, but this one, I think we're calling it Becoming Legolas.
For those of you who do not know who or what, it's not a what, it's a who Legolas is.
Could be a what.
He's a prolific, legendary character from the great J.R. Tolkien.
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings series.
What is his weapon of choice, Chris?
It is the long, I guess it'd be is it a long bow or is it a short bow?
Longbow.
It's
I think
a
it's a
bow.
longbow. It's a bow.
Yeah,
It shoots arrows.
At times it seems shorter than long.
Yeah.
If I think back
Question
to
is,
the
does he
films.
use the same bow in all three movies, or does it ever change?
I don't
Because
know.
doesn't he get, like, in the first movie after we're nerding out here, first movie / book after they visit the woodland realm, doesn't he get a bow as a gift? So technically it's a different bow than they were using in the beginning.
That detail would obviously most likely be in the novel and not in the film. That like scene if he does get a new bow, but he is part of the gang in Lord of the Rings, and he's very accurate. So
He
when
makes it look easy, man.
When you see that guy, I actually watched a behind the scenes where he slides down the stairs at Helm's Deep, and I think he rattles off 3 or 4 shots on because he's gliding on an orc's shield as he's coming down the steps. But they, in the behind the scenes, they have him all cabled up, and maybe it's the stunt actor. I can't remember.
No, I think it was actually him.
It might be him, but
I think it was actually him.
They had to like strap the shield to his feet, and it was like really clumsy. So when you see the film, you're like, wow, that's amazing. What an epic moment when he's just defending the realm, if you will. And it was
perfect
many
shots.
It was many takes in the filmmaking to get that. But yeah, we're talking about bows, and there's no other legendary character maybe more prominently known than Legolas.
Maybe Robin Hood.
Well, yeah, I might give Robin Hood. He might have the edge. But Robin Hood's kind of been dormant for a while, it seems.
They've made too many Robin Hood movies. That's the problem. And only like 1 or 2 are good. So
yeah.
But, you know, Legolas kind of has a leg up on Robin Hood being the better archer, because isn't Legolas like he's supposed to be like 1,500 years old. He's had a little more time to refine his craft. So if he's not the best archer in the world, then I don't know.
His quiver, for those of you who don't know what a quiver is, it's what you see on the back of your legendary archers, or in any novels where the arrows are held. And his quiver actually replenishes arrows, if I remember right.
It's a magic quiver.
Is that accurate, or am I thinking of something else?
I think that's totally correct, because he shoots so many arrows in the movie. You're like, he would definitely be out of arrows by now.
Wouldn't it be epic if we had some sort of setup like that? Because you never have to go arrow hunting. Because I've lost a few arrows. I don't know about you, but
yeah, it hurts.
Let's kick off with something fun. I was deer hunting with my bow, and lo and behold, here come them turkeys. And I think I let 3 or 4 arrows go at 50 yards. Because half the time they don't know what the heck's going on. An arrow sails by and it just buries itself. But
yep, that was one expensive turkey, Chris, because you did end up getting the turkey, but you did lose a few arrows in the process.
No, I didn't.
You found all of them?
Yeah, I found all of them, but I didn't hit a turkey.
Oh, was that the next time?
Yeah, the very first time I went out with my bow and we were deer hunting,
Got
that's
it.
when I single arrow drilled that tom at 40 yards or whatever it was.
Yeah, that's a good shot on a turkey for
I was
sure.
pretty deadly with that bow, but it was the draw length was so short on it, and it was a
We're
Facebook
talking,
special. It wasn't, but I mean, it wasn't anything to write home about, but it did the job. And hey, it
yeah,
was my first kill.
yeah. First kill, first bow. It's
Mm-hmm.
pretty It's pretty awesome. Um, so I mean, if you're listening to this, you've maybe been with us for the past 12 episodes. This is episode 13. Or maybe you're joining us just now for the first time. But we want to talk about bows and archery because archery is a very archery is one of those things that's really easy to get into the weeds, even more so than rifles, I think.
I don't know. I
Um,
think there's weeds for everything.
there is, but I just feel like with archery, there's so many more moving parts on a bow that can go wrong than with a rifle, that it's or a shotgun or whatever.
Well, yeah, it's a
I'm
strung up, randomly mechanismed tension, draw length, sight.
brace height,
It's
cable
definitely for.
drive. There's all these crazy things happening all at
It's
once. That
did you wax your strings lately, or are they totally dried out? Like
is your
the,
string 3 seasons old? When was the last time you replaced your string and your cables? There's so many. It's so easy into the weeds. The
you've had issues when your release broke, or didn't you lose one? I can't remember.
I lost one.
Yeah, so you what
I
do
had one break.
you
Actually, no, I had one break too.
and you I mean you could, in theory, you could shoot your compound without your release, like
You
with your
could,
finger, but the tension on that thing is so different than
yeah, yeah, very
your
different.
longbow. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So Chris, tell me why. Talk to me a little bit about why you might decide to get into archery or bow hunt, because let's be honest, most people would have to agree that of the weapons that you can use to hunt, excluding spears,
Tools.
because we're tools that you use to hunt, archery has to be the toughest for sure, and the lowest, probably your lowest odds of success. So why would someone choose to archery hunt? And maybe like what was your reason for getting into bow hunting?
Well, I grew up, we've talked about it in past episodes, but on the farm, and one or two of my uncles had a compound bow and, would go out and shoot deer. So, but it was so minimal. It was like an afterthought. It was in the back of, you just as a kid, you're like, oh yeah, they had a bow. That's cool. But you'd never be able to draw it because, the weight was, as a kid or a teen, you're like, man. Um, Bow hunting extends your season for one.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge draw. Get it? Draw.
Ha.
And then I think we've talked about, when you're out in nature and there's a connection to this world and creation and what God's done. Bow hunting in many ways is more elegant and
Mm-hmm.
technical, and it brings you back, I think, more elemental. It's you're quiet. It is quiet. There's no explosions or projectiles going thousands of yards. You have to be methodical about how
Mm-hmm.
you stalk in to your prey or wait. Like, there's those aspects of it. So I think it's also the challenge of it too. You are closer to the target and the animal traditionally, 99 out of 100 times. Like, you just can't take 100-yard shots. I mean, you could release something on a caribou or an elk if you're an expert marksman at 100 and you've shot it over and over again, because there are guys out there who can do that
Mm-hmm.
proficiently, because it's a big target. But um, 50 yards and in is where we like to live.
Yeah, and that can be like super species dependent too, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd be okay for sure to let something go at 60 on an elk, but again, that's only after I start getting outside and letting arrows go again on the target.
Mm-hmm.
getting tuned back up, because there's definitely some muscle memory, and there's definitely some, it's not just you draw and you're letting it go in 3 seconds. You might have a 2 minute hold,
Yeah.
holding on the back wall. And the
Ugh.
back wall, for those of you who don't know, is once you draw, there's your mechanisms, or your um,
Cams.
the cams set into like a soft place there. You kind of feel the you really do feel the abounding energy that is in those strings with the cams
Mm-hmm.
release or subside on this
Yeah.
back wall the way that they're
That's
created.
yeah.
So
That's called the let off.
you're but there is also fatigue in that. So if you have
Mm-hmm.
I've seen many videos where, I haven't done it yet and had the situation. I've drawn a couple times and had to wait 60 seconds. Um, and then I realized, these are actually more fawns, younger female deer versus what I thought they were, which was a little bit more mature. And I'm like, I'm not gonna let it go. And they walked 7 yards from me,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I was holding for easily 60 seconds, and then I didn't want to like scare them out of there, so I'm waiting for their eyes to be forward and past me, and then you kind of let off in that quiet, or you're trying to be as quiet as possible. But
Yeah.
is that different for you? Were you drawn in the same challenging, extend the season type space, and then an appreciation for, because a quote unquote kill with a bow is vastly different of an experience, at least for me,
Mm-hmm.
than a firearm.
Yeah. I would say that extending the season was a big thing for me, especially when I first started getting hunting. I just did firearms, and so the idea of literally, the idea of literally having to wait until like October or no, actually November for deer firearm season to hunt deer, it feels like forever. Like that's such a long wait. And there's other seasons that are happening before that, whether it's duck or pheasant or other things, but it was like, man, I had that deer itch that I had to scratch. And also if you're hunting firearms, especially here in Minnesota, you have a week and a half, or if you're not able to hunt weekdays, you have 2 weekends. That's it. And so for me, I'm like, that's not enough hunting for me. Like I need to hunt more. And so archery offered that opportunity, because here archery usually opens right around like September 15th ish for archery, and it runs all the way till December 31st. So you've got like basically three and a half months that you can bow hunt. Um, and so that was the big draw for me. But also, yeah, I think there was the challenge aspect of it, because yeah, you have to get in close. You're learning a new skill. There's all these technical things that you have to learn, and I mean, it's probably very similar, but into shooting your rifle long range at a gong and like making impact at like 400 plus yards like that. There's a really big feeling of satisfaction from that. But man, it's a different kind of satisfaction when you're shooting your bow, maybe stretching out your range, your distance, and making impacts and having like good group sizes. It's like it's really gratifying. And then for that first bow kill, it is unlike anything I've ever shot with a gun, like far and away, just because so much more work goes into it. There's so much more skill involved, and it literally feels like you outsmarted the deer. Whereas with a rifle or something, you can be 2, 3, 400 yards away, and that deer just walked into an opening, and there you go, you get to shoot it. Not to say there's no skill involved in rifle hunting, but truly you have to be able to outsmart a deer in their own backyard with your bow, and that's just a really cool feeling. um
Yeah, it was did you get in or consider bow hunting or purchasing a bow with any western hunts in mind at first, or was that a afterthought? Or
that was totally an afterthought. And as a matter of fact,
same for me.
As a matter of fact, when I first started archery hunting, and we can kind of use this as a segue in talking about the different kinds of bows, but when I first got into archery hunting, I started with a recurve bow. I didn't start with a compound. Um, and I hunted for 2 seasons, I think, with my recurve before I ended up deciding, okay, it's time to modernize here and get a compound bow. Um, but
I thought you were nuts.
hey, I got my first archery kill with my recurve bow. Um,
Yeah, I'm not casting any shade on you. I was like, that's I don't want to do that.
I mean, in hindsight, it was really, I think it
I can
set me up.
appreciate it and I can
Yeah.
admire those who do, but for me,
Hmm.
I'm like, I just don't want to recurve bow
Yeah.
hunt.
Well, and I've since sold that recurve, and I'm very strictly focused on compound bows. But um, for me, it was a kind of it was almost like a barrier to entry thing, just because when I wanted to get into archery hunting, didn't really have much money, and so I just didn't feel like I could afford like a compound bow and all the different accessories that come with it. Whereas a recurve bow is a much more more simple tool. It literally like stick and string, and then you've got your arrows, and then you've got like maybe an arm guard, and then like a finger tab, and that's all there is to it. And all that equipment is way cheaper than anything you're going to buy for a compound bow. However, with a recurve, you have to practice with it a ton, because it's not like a compound bow where when you pull it back, you were talking about, you hit that back wall, and that weight just kind of drops off a little bit by like 75 to 80% or something. With a recurve, you're pulling that weight all the way back and you're holding it until you shoot. And my recurve that I shot, I think we had 55-pound limbs. So you're pulling back 55 pounds and you're holding 55 pounds until you shoot. And so because you have that extra weight that you're holding, you have to practice a lot to be proficient and accurate. And even then, your max range, at least for me, my max range was like 25 yards. And that was a long shot with a recurve. So you have to get in super close. And yeah, I did find success, but it took a ton of work. And that was also before I had kids. There is no way that I could shoot a recurve now and be proficient, just because I don't have the time to practice that much with kids.
Yeah, talk
So
to me a little bit about like crossbows as well, because in Minnesota, crossbows are traditionally reserved for, am I correct on the seniors and medical issues, as long those were the two items, and now
yeah,
they've
I
been
think
opened up.
it yeah, so historically it's been, you have to be, it's like 60, I think 60 years old or something like that. Either that or have like a physical disability that doesn't allow you to use a recurve or a compound bow. Um, I think they changed that though. I think anyone can use a
Yes,
crossbow now.
correct.
So um, there's a lot of division within the
The
archery.
crossbows are unbelievable.
Yeah.
Man, the feet per second, the accuracy, it's you might as well be using a
The
rifle, but
In a way, I mean, it's not the exact same, but again, there is a lot of division within the archery community about use of crossbows. Specifically, the fact because crossbows have been opening up so much across the different states, there's less regulation on them. Um, a lot of people think that it's basically like kind of cheating, like it's almost like getting to hunt with a rifle during archery season.
yeah.
I'm not going to jump into the weeds too much there, because I think there is some nuance involved there. Um, I've never used a crossbow myself. I think I kind of more so appreciate the romance of uh either a recurve or a compound, just because I do feel like there's more skill involved. But I'm also not going to knock anyone for using a crossbow. If it's perfectly legal where you live, you go for
Mhm.
it. Um,
Yeah, let's segue into arrows and broadheads, and
yeah.
just kind of give me an outline for those who have never hunted with a bow. Obviously, know that's a bow, and this is an arrow, but break down some of the aspects of that terminology wise, parts of maybe the arrow,
Mm-hmm.
and why those things are important, and like how they came to be.
Yeah. Before we jump into that, I do want to make a note because I was talking a little bit ago about what kind of made me decide to hunt with a recurve first. The fact being it was more so a money thing. I do want to say that it is very possible to get into a compound bow for like fairly inexpensively.
Yeah.
Now that number is going to be different for everyone, like what you consider to be expensive or inexpensive. But for example, my first compound bow, I think I got one, and it was a Bear Approach, and it was, I want to say, $350, and that was the ready to hunt package. So that came with a sight, that came with a stabilizer, um, and it came with a quiver. So it came with 3 items that are like pretty important for hunting. And so basically that bow was ready to go. So there are options like that out there for people who are wanting to get into the archery space and they don't want to drop like a ton of money, because you can drop a ton of money on a bow setup. But don't let the price of some of the more expensive flagship bows keep you out of the archery space, because it's very gratifying. Like, Chris, how much did you pay for your first bow?
I think $150.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's I'd say that's pretty doable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it was a blessing. Got a deal. Didn't know I really wanted to get into bow hunting as quick. I know we were talking about it, and then the opportunity arose. I think if I remember right, I bought a sight. I can't remember.
I don't remember.
It had one on it. I know I upgraded the stabilizer on it,
Mm-hmm.
and then picked up some new arrows. I think I had it restrung. I can't. It's been so long ago. I can't really remember, but um, no, it was great. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
fitted for my draw length or anything like that. But
Right.
if you remember, my arm was like kind of just like not set
I'm
at all.
I'm honestly very surprised at how well you shot that bow for it not being sized to you at all.
It was fun because we were up at the cabin and we were having those off the deck shooting competitions. We brought our
Mm-hmm.
couple targets, and you had that styrofoam deer or whatever target, and we kind of put those around the yard, and um we had our little competitions
Yeah.
before all our kids were around, and that was a lot of fun. But yeah,
Yeah.
I actually did shoot that bow very, very accurately,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't shoot my current bow less accurately. It was just I could make that thing Robin Hood the like arrows, it felt like.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, it was surprising just because it wasn't fit to you at all, but you were still able to somehow get some decent accuracy out of that thing. Um, but yeah, let's talk about some of the components that go into bows. So we're gonna focus mostly here on compound bows because that's kind of where we live. I would say that's where probably 90% of the archery hunting population is kind of at. Um, so I mean, you're gonna have your main components, obviously your arrows. So let's talk about arrows a little bit. Let's talk about the anatomy of an arrow, what makes an arrow work. So number one, you're going to have your arrow shaft. Now, the shaft is just the long thing that makes up an arrow. Those are usually made of either out of 3 materials. You're going to have carbon fiber, which is the most common now. Um, Once upon a time, the most common arrow shaft type or material would have been aluminum. You can still find those, but again, carbon fiber is by
Well,
and
the most
far,
common was wood a long time ago.
well, a long time ago. Yes, and you can still
You could
and
still
you
hunt with wood
and you
arrows.
can still get wood shafts. A lot of guys that shoot traditional archery. When I say traditional, I mean like recurve or a longbow or something. A lot of those guys still use wood shafts. They're usually cedar, but by and far the most common now is carbon fiber. Um, and then Chris, what are the things on the back of the arrow called?
Well, you got the fletchings,
Mm-hmm.
and they help your arrow go where you want it to go.
Yep.
Without those, you'd have it's kind of like shooting a straw wrapper off of a straw. It just kind of goes any direction.
If your bow
Um,
is tuned very well, so that's called bear shaft tuning. If your bow is very well tuned, it can actually go pretty far, pretty straight. But eventually, yes, it will kind of fly off into the abyss.
Yeah, it's got no. I mean, if your airplane that you got on didn't have a tail, you're gonna have a tough time.
Steering.
Well, there's the B-2 bomber, and that we could, flying wing. We could get into some other technical details, but tails are important. Just like a motor on a boat, when you turn it left or right, it helps it go straight.
Hmm.
So, and stabilize it from, you want it to go enter the target in a straight as trajectory as possible to go through the animal to go penetrate deep. So if it's going in, a kitty wampus angle, you're going to have skeptical results at best if it's
Right. Yeah.
flying sideways. So,
Keeps that arrow true, right?
yep. And then what's the knock? We got on the back is the knock. Some of you will see how on videos where it lights up, but that's
Hmm.
to seat your back of your arrow and the same spot on your string every single time, so that you're repeating the process and getting your accurate. That's where accuracy comes from. You got to repeat, repeat, repeat.
Yep.
um you turned me on to the illuminated nocks, and I'm like, I don't know why anybody else would not shoot illuminated, especially when they're hunting. I don't know if there's a scenario where you'd be like, you can't do this because it's going to ruin the hunt or something, but just to
No, I
watch where that
mean,
arrow goes, especially in dim light, you see the tracer.
it's
It's
pretty cool.
super helpful.
Yeah, it definitely helps knowing like where maybe where you hit the animal if you didn't if like yeah, in low light situations or even not. It's just nice to be able to kind of see that light and know
Hmm.
exactly where your arrow went.
Hmm.
Um there are some drawbacks that are really splitting hairs with the illuminated nocks. They're really expensive compared to like regular nocks. Like you can get regular nocks, like you can get a dozen for like I don't know,
Three
$10.
bucks,
And
$7.
then but for the illuminated Nox, it's usually like $40 for like three.
Hmm.
But
Which I think is way overpriced. There's
yeah,
gotta be a cool factor upcharge.
I would assume there
Gotta
is.
be a
It's
cool factor upcharge. It's a
pretty
little
simple
LED
tech,
in there.
pretty simple technology. But so okay, so shifting from the back of the arrow, let's go to the front of the arrow. So before we talk about broadheads or field points, which is what everyone's going to know, there is something called the insert. So your inserts are what go into the shaft of your arrow. These little metal inserts, and that's pretty much just what your broadheads or your field points screw into, so that you have a tip on the front of your arrow. So, Chris, tell me a little bit about field points, and then let's jump into broadheads.
Well, your field points are simple pieces of metal on the end that you can repetitively shoot over and over again to work on your accuracy. And it's not rocket science. They screw into the end, and they're cheap, and you don't want to hunt with them. But you could probably shoot a rabbit or something with it. It's just not. It's not made necessarily to quote unquote inflict maximum damage like a broadhead is designed to do.
Right.
It is for you to practice.
Yeah. So broadheads. Are there different kinds? Let's jump into that. Um, yeah, talk to me about broadheads.
They're in the sense of being pokey. There's only one kind. It's very pokey, and no, yeah, they're definitely there's. You have your. I mean, what's your go to? Are you a fixed guy? Are you a mechanical? Are you hybrid?
Well, maybe we should.
And maybe give when you say your favorite, give the terminology about that, and then ping pong it back to me, and I'll see if I
Okay.
have something different to say.
Yeah. So there are two main categories of broadheads. I think Chris is trying to get us to jump into here. There are fixed blade broadheads, which are kind of what they sound like. The blades are just stationary. So kind of picture your classic broadhead that you would see in the movies or in a cartoon or something. It's like a little triangle. And those are super
It's
sharp.
finding your Native American arrowhead.
Yep, it's super sharp blades to penetrate the animal and to cause damage, cutting damage inside. Um, there's nothing about it that moves. It's fixed. That's why it's called a fixed blade. Now the other kind is a mechanical broadhead. And what this is, it has a mechanical component to it. Usually, what it means is there is on the arrowhead there's still a sharp point that would be like a fixed portion, but further down the broadhead there might be little wings that when the broadhead penetrates into the animal, those wings are mechanically activated and it causes blades to flip out of the broadhead, essentially creating a very large cutting surface. Um, the reason for mechanical, um, or the reason that people might shoot mechanicals over fixed is because they want a larger cutting surface or cutting diameter. Because a fixed blade is going to have, in general, a smaller cutting diameter, and the reason for that is if you have a really large cutting diameter, that can kind of mess up the trajectory of your arrow. Whereas mechanicals, when you shoot mechanicals and they're not unfolded, they haven't opened up, they're really, really, really small. And so it's almost like shooting a field point or a field tip. But once that contact is made and then those blades come out, then you're kind of getting the best of both worlds in terms of accuracy and cutting surface.
It's no
But
different than different types of like paper airplanes you fold, or different types of airplanes that actually fly in the sky, fighter jets, tankers. There's different aerodynamics on that. So when you're letting that arrow come out of whatever poundage you have your bow set at, it's cooking. It's
mm-hmm,
coming out very quickly, and you're breaking the air. It has to sail through that resistance, and depending on how, back to the fletchings, when we were talking about the back of the arrow, it's no different than a boat or the efficiency of that blade, spinning on that motor through the
mm-hmm,
water. The smaller blade on the back of a boat engine and a smaller horsepower engine is struggling to push as much water as possible if you have a larger, you know, ship. So if you have a large engine and a blade on the back, it can move a lot more water. It can move the resistance that it's hitting better. And when you're talking about aerodynamics and it's flying, every little bit on a paper airplane, if you've ever built a paper airplane, it can go left every time if it's built a little off on the left, or it can go straight down. And
mm-hmm,
that's why tuning your bow and your arrows becomes, and we'll get into that, but it becomes such a the compound or sorry the mechanical broadhead and the fixed broadhead will have different aerodynamics. So back to the field point, which Peter's talking about, when you let that go, it's not expanded, and it expands on contact,
mm-hmm,
is where the triggers are, so that you are replicating as best as possible your field points, because a fixed blade broadhead will definitely fly a little bit different than your field points, because the surface area is just different, air is moving over it differently.
mm-hmm.
And
It's almost like the fixed blade broadhead. The broadhead is steering the arrow as opposed to just the fletching is steering the arrow when it comes to like field tips and mechanicals. That fixed blade has a little bit of say in where that arrow goes, in addition to the back fletchings. Um, so they're a little harder to fixed blades. They can be made to be super super accurate.
I would imagine that some companies do minimal research on the air moving over their blades, while other companies might do more. I have no context. This is
Yeah.
totally subjective. But if you're thinking about, some people are just trying to move product, right? And they want a sharp, sharp blade. They may not spend as much time as others. Like, that's just maybe common sense. It's no different than a
Yeah.
car company like a Toyota or Chevy. They probably have different amounts of time. They might have federal
Mm-hmm.
standards, but from a production standpoint, there are different levels of quality, as in anything, where you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna, that's why you need to test out and do some research, jump on forums, blogs, because the hunting community will generally start to get some quantitative information into the space. And then what you should be doing is not taking that ever on face value. You should be going out and trial and erring,
Mm-hmm.
practicing and understanding what it does with your bow setup, with where you're hunting. Mountain hunting to desert hunting is going to be different.
Yep.
Just because air quality is different, and not that it's not as drastic as shooting your rifle, at different elevations, but
Yeah, because you're not dealing with the same like
mm-hmm,
range, you know.
mm-hmm,
Um, but yeah, in terms of what we have used or use now, I the past couple years have been leaning more toward mechanical. Um, One of the biggest arguments against mechanical is that because there's moving parts, there is opportunity for failure or mechanical failure. You'll always, I mean, you read enough stories or read enough forums or whatever about people bow hunting, you will come across stories of guys saying, "Well, I shot this mechanical and it never deployed. It failed." And so basically, it was like I shot a deer with a field tip. And there is that possibility. I would say that the prevalence of that is not super common. I would also say that I think that used to be more of a common problem than it is now. I think that the longer that mechanical broadheads have been out and the more iterations of them that have been made and the more companies that are making them and releasing them, I would say, or I would argue that the mechanisms have gotten smarter, they've gotten they've gotten more reliable. And so
mm-hmm,
I think that there are more advantages to a mechanical than not, especially if you're trying to get that really big cutting surface. And really, it's going to be hunt dependent, because you kind of have to think about your game specifically. What's going to be the most efficient way to kill that game? Now, with some smaller game, let's just even say like a white-tailed deer or something, you're going to probably want the biggest cutting, a larger cutting diameter, mainly because in whitetail country, a lot of the time you're working on small parcels of land or smaller parcels of land where if you get a marginal shot on that deer, it's going to be able to run for a long ways and then off of your property, and then you're not going to be able to recover that deer, or you might not be able to recover that deer because now it's on someone else's property. So you're wanting an animal to expire.
hopefully you have great relationships with your neighbors, and
Right.
that actually should be something you should endeavor to, because
Mm-hmm.
the wildlife is not yours, and really we're like, all the land you quote unquote own or that you're on is someday not going to be yours. It's not going to
Yep.
be your kids. Like everything we own is going to go somewhere when we're not here. So that's why conservation and stewardship is so huge for me, because
Mm-hmm.
you are just passing through this world, and if you have the privilege to do that, like, be cordial with your neighbors if you can. Like,
Yep.
care for them, because the wildlife moves. There are no fences. They jump fences. Everything
Mm-hmm.
lives everywhere, and we are all we all have a part to play in that. Um,
Yep.
and you set an example whether you know it or not. If you're a good neighbor, that impacts people differently. People might see how you treat game, how
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting on a high horse, but yeah.
Well, the
So
point I was making is that um, specifically with mechanicals, typically because you have a larger cutting diameter or cutting surface, you're going to get much larger wounds or wound channels or holes in the animal, which means they're going to bleed out faster, which means they're going to expire faster. Um, Also, with smaller game like white-tailed deer, it's easier to get your arrow to pass all the way through because it's just not as big of an animal. Whereas with something like an elk or something, it's a much thicker animal, and so if you're wanting to try and get good penetration and maybe get a pass through with an arrow, you're going to need something that penetrates a little better, which typically means a slightly smaller cutting diameter. So we're getting to the weeds a little bit here, but they're
mhm.
important things to consider when you're choosing a broadhead. But I personally have started moving towards mechanicals, and I have started using a broadhead or using a company who makes a mechanical broadhead that has multiple cutting diameters for different purposes. So it's called Sever. I really, really like it. I think it's a super smart design. There it is. You kind of gave away.
I did
You
have
kind of
them sitting up here.
you kind of gave it away what you're going to talk about, but um,
Well,
it,
this is I'm a noob on these for sure. They haven't been on any of my arrows yet, and
what do you like? So you haven't used them yet, but like from first glance, what about them do you like?
well, I like I want to get one of these out here, but I like how sleek they are.
Mm-hmm.
The profile of it is fantastic, and it does look much like the field points.
Yeah, it's very minimalistic when
I
it's
got to
not
make sure I don't
deployed.
like slice myself open here.
Yeah.
That'd be
Well,
the funniest
as
thing,
long
right?
as it doesn't as long as it doesn't oh, those are the hybrids though, right?
Yeah. So,
Yeah. Okay.
um, this is the first time I've taken them out, everyone. But anyways, you got your
Yeah.
so
Oh man, I love
you
those
have
broadheads.
you have the fixed blades, which are on top and bottom.
Mm-hmm.
This is funny, like because some people are like probably listening, not watching, but
Yeah. He's holding the broadhead up to the
I'm
camera,
holding
everyone.
the broadhead up to the camera, and what
Wow,
you see,
that's a nice looking broadhead.
it looks
Shiny.
sharp. It looks real sharp.
Shiny.
But what you see is about, I think it's probably a full inch bleed. So from the top part, you think of it as a shark. You got the shark's nose, you got the shark's top fin. That's what I'm talking about. And then it
Mm-hmm.
mirrors on the bottom. But if I rotate it 90 degrees, now you're going to see these two like handles. And they hit, when the arrow is penetrating, when they hit here, there's back wings here that are called bleeders. Or are the other ones bleeders? I can't remember.
The fixed ones are bleeders. The
Oh, yeah,
wings
that's
are
right.
the main blades that come
That's right.
out.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the wings expand out and they're creating a greater wound channel
And they're
to.
surgical steel and they're crazy sharp.
So that's just why I'm being tenderly careful with these. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm excited to use them. I'm excited to get them on my
So
arrows, and
that broadhead would be considered a hybrid because it has the mechanical aspect, but it does have those little fixed bleeder blades. The benefit,
there is a rubber band here on the back. I don't know if you can see it,
yep,
but
that
that's actually
silicone band.
it's actually holding it together. And those blades, when there is the force hits those levers, will
Cut the band.
snap the band, and
Mm-hmm.
they'll open up pretty good. And you
Yep.
actually can reuse them.
Mm-hmm. What I
So
really like about that broadhead, and this wasn't even meant to be like gear talk, but what I really like about that broadhead too is that everything except for the blades is all titanium construction. So it's very, very durable. There's a YouTube channel called Lusk Archery.
extra rubber bands right in the bottom there. Oh, it
There
fell
you
out.
go. But yeah, there's a YouTube channel called Lusk Archery, and it's this dude.
Sounds like
I think
lust
he's a
archery. It's
huh
just lusting after the archery. That's what it sounds like to
Lusk
me.
with a
Lu-
K.
Lust archery.
Anyway, I can't remember. I think he's a pastor or something like that.
Oh,
But
he
his
would. He would lust archery, and he's a pastor.
but his big passion is archery, and he hunts all over the world. But his big thing that he does on his YouTube channel is he reviews like probably almost every single broadhead that's out there, and he puts them through tests, these tests that he's designed, and gives them scores. And the Sever scores near the almost I think is like the top mechanical broadhead like every year. He tests new iterations and versions. And anyway, this isn't even a plug for Sever. We have no relationship with them at all. I just think it's an amazing
Sever
broadhead.
wants to sponsor us.
I think Sever is actually owned by Easton.
There's a lot of companies out there that want to sponsor us.
Yeah, they just don't even know it yet.
They don't know it yet. They want to
But
be.
anyway,
Man, it'd be fun just to. I just love products. I love people's
mm-hmm.
ingenuity. I love the time that it takes to think up, an invention. And
It's also fun
um,
just taking the time to test things, you know?
yes, and being able to reap the benefits of those and improve the space. When you're just talking about broadheads, because there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of options out there. You can watch a lot of videos on YouTube dealing with like going through the gels. They do that with the rifles as well with the different cartridges, but you can see the penetration on that, and those are fun things to watch. Those are fun things
Mm-hmm.
to consider, especially when they're looking at the wound channel, like when those wings open up and you're seeing actually how it's cutting, or maybe they don't stay open the whole time.
Yep.
Uh, that information is important. It's not going to be, I wouldn't say, quantitative. They're not like shooting 100 times with the same broadhead, watching 100 different wound channels. It's more so like they might shoot 3 times max with it,
Yeah.
and they're
Just see what it does.
testing against something else. But
Mm-hmm.
it is fun to have that visualization. I like the visuals when I'm that's how I learn. I have to see it while I'm hearing it, and then I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I understand that. So
So, Chris, if you're let's pretend that you're getting into archery, and you're wanting to bow hunt. Would you go with a mechanical or a fixed blade broadhead for your first hunt?
I don't know. I don't think it makes a difference. I think if whatever you're gonna order or whatever setup you have to start with something.
Mm-hmm.
So you're gonna do a little bit of research, but be familiar with whatever your setup is.
Yep.
Get acquainted with it and make sure you understand it and why, like why understand why you chose it. You may have
Mm-hmm.
just been like, well, I saw this guy shoot it, and that's enough to understand your why, but dive a little deeper to understand what's it going to do if you hit a rib or you're going through, if you're a frontal shot, because sometimes situations are going to present themselves that are not ideal. You can't take the side profile lung shot every single time.
Yeah.
And the more time you spend, you will understand angles where you can confidently and accurately uh, drop that animal because you understand the placement. So yeah, I started with fixed blades. I liked mine. I thought they were fantastic. But
Mm-hmm.
as time went on, I just wanted something more compact. That's going to feel more like my field point because I shoot my field points pretty well. So
Yep. Yeah, I'd say that's one of the biggest benefits, especially for a beginner, of maybe why you'd consider mechanical. Again, like Chris said, just pick something and use it, learn with it, figure it out for yourself, and you'll find out whether you like fixed blades or if you like a certain brand or something like that. It really doesn't matter. Um, I would say that one of the reasons you might consider mechanical is because they do fly so much like your field points, and if you're a beginner, more than likely you're not going to have all of the knowledge that it takes to learn how to tune a bow perfectly. Even I don't know how to tune a bow perfectly, and I've been shooting archery for
find your shop, find who you enjoy being around and like going in and talking to,
yep.
and because it's cool. They're usually local businesses. Some of the bigger spots can have varying results. There's still
Mm-hmm.
people, but I go to a place that's a mom and pop shop, and it's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. All right, so let's just jump through really quick some of the other accessories that you're going to need to get started. To
You need your release.
Yep.
That's probably the number one item in a, in addition to your sight and your stabilizer. Peter mentioned
Yep.
those early with the full package setup on a bow if you're going to spend something at Shields or
Yep.
Cabela's or Fleet Farm.
So let's start with a release, Chris. What is a release
So you're going to actually hook up to your string on the back of your bow,
on a D
and
loop, right?
I mean, I hope you're using the loop on the back. There's a little. You're gonna have your string that comes straight down within the bow, and you're gonna hook in. It's specifically designed for either your thumb release or your trigger release. I'm a trigger guy. Peter's a thumb guy.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I feel most comfortable with. And so you hook up, you draw back, and that allows you to hold the tension there confidently with your release. Mine goes around my wrist, and then it comes into the front of my palm, and it kind of sits right. It does sit right on my trigger finger, my pointer finger, index, and it's just a little pull, no different than a trigger on a gun, and it releases that when I want to. But Peter, you talk to me about your thumb release because I find it interesting. I don't think I had any exposure to release, like a release, when I was getting into the compound world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just had never thought about it before because I
Yeah.
always had seen the bows. But my bow came with a a trigger release, like
Yep.
it for my index finger, and that's all I've
Mm-hmm.
known. And I've grabbed yours a couple times, and I'm like, oh, I hate this. But that's probably just because I'm so familiar with the other side. But tell me about what you have found on your side with the
Yeah,
thumb.
and if you wanna visualize what we're talking about here, you can always um, Google these different types of releases. So I use a thumb trigger, whereas Chris uses like that index trigger, like he was talking about. Thumb trigger, essentially, it is it's a handheld device that's probably about this big around, so it kind of fits in the palm of your hand, and there's usually little indentations for your fingers to sit on. So you kind of hold it like this, and then you attach it to your string. When you pull back, you're actually holding it upside down, and the trigger is actually activated by your thumb, and there's a little metal barrel essentially that your thumb sits on right there. And when you're ready to shoot your bow or release the arrow, then you just slowly depress that thumb trigger until it releases. Um, there's really no right or wrong release. It really does come down to personal preference,
No,
which is
there
why it's
is. There is. The thumb release is wrong.
well, um,
For me. For me.
for him. For me, I started with a thumb release, and I think a big part of the reason why is, like I mentioned before, when I started archery, I started with a recurve. Now, if you're shooting a recurve, you know that you don't use a release agent or a release assistant, whatever you want to call it. A release, you are using fingers, and and if you're not using bare fingers, then a lot of the time you have something called a finger tab, which is like a piece of leather that goes over your fingers, just so that way the string doesn't cut into your fingers when you're holding that string. So I was used to having my hand next to my face like this. And so when I was moving to compound bow from recurve, to me the
What
most
Peter, if you're
natural
listening, what Peter is saying is he has
yes, I'm
he
sorry.
has his arm back extended as if you were going to do a backstroke in swimming, but your forearm is still facing forward along the side of his face as if he
Yes.
was holding a bow, the traditional,
Yep.
traditional image you get when you draw a bow, but his
And
fingers
my
are
fingers are
cupped.
next to my face, and they're cupped like they're holding something. So when it came time to decide what kind of release I wanted to use for a compound bow, the most natural and familiar feeling option was a handheld thumb trigger release, just because, granted, my hand was flipped from what it was when I was using my recurve. It just felt natural, and I just really liked the feel of that. So again, no right or wrong, but that's just kind of what I arrived at. So that's what I use. Um, but anyway, so you just kind of, when you go in to buy your bow, maybe pick up some different releases, talk to some guys at the archery shop, and kind of have them walk you through what each of the different ones are like, maybe what some of the pros and cons are.
Most
And
places will allow you to shoot a bow.
yep,
Especially if you've never done it before, they can set you up. They'll look at your draw length. They'll
yeah, they have demo bows that you can use.
make sure your poundage is something you can comfortably pull, and then
Mm-hmm.
they will have a couple options for releases, so you can get a feel for what you may or may not like. And if they're quality, they're going to walk you through that whole process and
Yep.
really look at your form and try to get you to a place where like they're giving you a great setup to be as successful as possible. But at the end of the day, you have to be accurate, right? You have to practice. So
Yeah. So moving on from releases, let's talk a little bit about sights. The sight is one of the most important parts of the bow for pretty obvious reasons, but Chris, tell us about sights.
set your sights on the target. So silly. Sights are great. There's a bunch different out there. There's fixed points, where you just have one dot, within the circle. A sight is essentially a circle most of the time. I'm not sure if there's anything else like free floating outside of a circle, but some of those you'll be able to dial, that single pin will be able to dial from, 10, 20, 30, as far out as you want. Others have 5 pins, 4 pins, 6 pins, and allow you to
Mm-hmm.
set those different based on your poundage and your accuracy when you're sighting in that bow. Uh, it'll just congruently follow the drop off of, when you let the arrow go. There is going to be it's going to drop. So the
Yep.
further out it goes, it slows down, it drops just like a bullet. So
And those different pins are set for different yardages,
yep,
basically.
and there's illuminated, there's non-illuminated. Most of them now collect the light off of some sort of setup, and it
Yeah, they're
draws the
fiber
light.
optic, and there's
Draws the light in.
sometimes
So
like a little flashlight thing built in.
yep, I think my
Yours has one.
battery's been dead a couple
Yeah, you got to
times.
replace that.
Yeah, I do. But yeah, find what you like. I think you're on a single pin right now, right?
No, I'm on a 3-pin slider, and it's a
Ah,
vertical, not horizontal pins or vertical pins. So it essentially looks like one pin coming up from the bottom, and I've got 3 different fiber optic dots for my different ranges. Um, Again, there's no right or wrong. It comes down to personal preference. Some people like it where the pins come in from the side. I've used both. Um, there are pros and cons to each. And Chris, I believe yours is you have horizontal pins, and I think it's 5-pin, isn't it?
yep.
Yeah. So
20, 30, 40, 50, 60.
a lot of people that are hunting really like the multi-pin just because um, animals don't sit still, believe it or not, and so it's nice that if you're on an animal and say he's at 20 yards and then all of a sudden he moves and he's 10 yards further away or 20 yards further away and now he's at 40. Well, if you have a single pin on a slider and you use that dial to change the yardage of where that pin would shoot, that's not very conducive for hunting situations a lot of the time because that that motion is going to be noticed by an animal. So it's nice to have the multiple pins because you say, okay, he was at 20, so I was going to use my top pin, but now he's at 40, so that just means I just have to use my third pin because that's 40. Don't have to move anything. It's just ready to go. So um, that's kind of the thought behind sights. We can talk more about sites another time, or if you have questions about specific sites or what our thoughts are, you're more than welcome to reach out to us and ask us. Again, gear talk. I mean, we could talk for hours about all this different stuff, but we're just kind of trying to move through here at like a 101 level. And then stabilizers, Chris. Let's talk about stabilizers really briefly. I would say that of the items we've talked about so far, stabilizers are I don't want to say like not important. They are important, but I would say that they're not as important as maybe some of the other things.
You can shoot your bow without one.
Yeah,
Like
totally.
it's but your stabilizers stabilizers
Stabilizers.
stabilizers
Sean
uh
Connery.
you're gonna depending on your bow, you could have some different options of where to put that stabilizer. It could be
Mm-hmm.
lower, it could be a little bit higher. You could do a reverse, opposite direction stabilizers. Typically they come off the front of the lower part of the bow
Mm-hmm.
and kind of stick out, for lack of a better term. And what
Yeah.
that's doing is it's in when you have the bow resting in the palm of your hand, hold the hand that holds the bow,
Yep.
you're going to have some weight distribution, right? It's going to want to fall a certain way, left, right,
Mm-hmm.
top heavy, bottom heavy. And that the stabilizer is designed for one of two things: to give you a lower center of gravity with your bow, uh, so that it does stay as
Stable.
still as possible in your release,
Yep.
and then also to take some of that reverb, because when you do let the bow go, if it's tuned right and you have a nice quality bow, it should be relatively quiet and not vibrate.
Mm-hmm.
Vibration is bad for nuts and bolts and screws and anything that's holding your bow together. So you want nice, a lot of the rubber, it's like washers, and they're not washers. Are they? They're not washers, but they're all over your bow.
They
There's all these
absorb the vibration,
to
basically.
absorb your, uh, the energy coming out of your bow has to go somewhere, and some of that gets lost in your hand in the bow. So
Yep.
you want to keep that quiet when you're bow hunting, obviously,
Yep.
and when you can keep the bow as perfectly aligned in your hand from when you're aiming to after the release, that is going to transfer as much energy forward with that arrow, and not rattle your bow apart after you shoot it 100 times. So
Yeah. There is a like night and day difference between I mean, this is a stupid statement. There's a night and day difference between a quiet bow and a loud bow. Like it's very obvious. You know what I mean?
ding.
Like some bows, yeah, they're like, and then some are just like my bow is very quiet.
Yeah.
My bow is very quiet. My first bow was not super quiet. Um, And that can make a difference in hunting situations. A deer could duck your bowstring. They hear that arrow, that bow go off, and it might spook them, and they might move a little bit, and that can be the difference between like a good hit and a bad hit. But anyway, yeah, stabilizers, they just keep that bow nice and stable. Like for example, I've got two stabilizers on my bow. I have one coming out the front, and I have one coming slightly backwards at an angle
You're
to the
so
left.
ritzy.
So it's but that's because when I hold my bow out in a natural position, it naturally wants to tilt to the right and backwards a little bit. So I needed to weight it so that it sits perfectly stable in my hand, so that when I release my bow, it's consistent every time, which I think is an important thing to kind of transition to shooting basics. I mean, there's a couple other gear things we could touch on. Rangefinders. If you're going to be a bow hunter, you should just buy a rangefinder. Just don't even mess with it. Just get a rangefinder so that you know how far you're shooting.
I once
With it,
went on a archery hunt and showed up to find out one of the archers was just going to eyeball it.
yeah.
For
Which
lack
I
of a
mean,
better term, that was the conversation. I was
which
like,
with
wait,
enough
you don't,
experience, with enough experience,
if you,
someone could do that. Like,
if
but you
you're
have to have a lot
shooting,
of
if you're
experience.
shooting, if you're a great judge of distance, but at the same time, you're in like the woods, you're in a field, and that distance is different in every single scenario, depending if they're in front of that tree or back of
Yeah.
that tree, and
Well,
you're
and you perceive that distance so differently depending on your setting.
different. Like, is it morning? Is it like nighttime? Like going to
Right.
evening with the sun setting? Like the way light moves tricks your eye. So
Yeah. But what did they used to do, Chris? What did they used to do?
they used to never have obviously rangefinders, but it is such a critical tool to help your accuracy because
Yeah, definitely.
hey, newsflash, when you're out sighting in or getting proficient, you're shooting your 20-yard pin over and over and over again at the 20-yard, 20 yards out. So
A deer
why
doesn't necessarily stand at 20 yards every time. You might stand at
well, you
26.
might be shooting
you know.
30 the whole time, or you might be shooting 35 or whatever the case is. My point is on the range when you're
Mm-hmm.
target practicing to get more accurate what that distance is. I can't fathom why you would not want to have a tool that perfectly tells you
Exactly how
this
far
is
away it
how
is.
far away it is with you, but you know that on the range. Like you're
Right.
the whole point of being on the range to then get in the tree stand and hunt for your animal is so that you know the distance to shoot because you're trying to get the animal. Why
Yep.
would you want to? Oh, yeah,
Anyway, get a decent rangefinder. You can get them now for not too crazy expensive, but it is a necessary tool for modern archery.
there's a lot of
Um,
drawings out there. I'm sure you could enter a couple, and eventually you're gonna win something. You might win a rangefinder, and it'd be free for you. So I get
yep.
like a drawing a day. I don't even know how many things I get in my stinking inbox. It's getting absurd.
Well, Chris, here's the thing: if you never enter, you're guaranteed not to win. So, so give them all your contact info. It'll only be a few emails a day. Uh,
Only a
um,
few.
okay, tree stands. I think those are pretty self-explanatory. Let's kind of skip over
I'm
that.
just gonna say, make sure you got a harness. That's
Yep.
all I'm gonna say. If you're
Use
climbing
the
up in a tree, if you don't know what a harness is, you can go Google it on the Googler, and you can go on YouTube and look for what the reviews are. But you need to be strapped in uh, when you're looking through your scope. Even in a shooting situation with a rifle, when you're not presently aware of your surroundings, standing up in a stand, a little bit of wind, just be safe. Just do the right
the
thing.
majority, I believe I'm correct in saying this, but the majority of hunting accidents and like injuries and deaths are from people falling out of tree stands because they aren't wearing a safety harness. So just don't be stupid. If you have a family, think about your family. If you don't have a family, um
Think about your future family.
yeah, think about your future family. Like just don't be dumb.
Think about
There's
your
no
friend.
reason.
Think about your buddy that's across the
Hmm.
woods and he's going to have to come
Yeah, you're gonna
drag you
ruin.
out. Yeah.
Not only are you gonna be
Don't ruin
dead,
his night,
you're
man.
gonna ruin his hunt. And that's the most important thing.
And then you're going to be the butt of all jokes for a long time
Yep.
if, if you're not critically injured.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going
All
though.
right. Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's touch on so like just like learning to shoot, just kind of like basics. I think the biggest thing I, I'm not going to I can't teach you how to shoot a bow over a podcast. Whether it's video or audio, I
But
can't
we're
teach you how
gonna
to
try.
I can't teach you how to do it. I would say that I mean there's a ton of good information on YouTube. Maybe watch some channels that are maybe some guys that sound like they know what they're doing. Maybe not like the random dude that only has
Find the
like
guy that sounds like he knows what he's
well,
doing.
what I mean by that is like maybe don't take your archery tips from a guy that has like 200 views on YouTube. Um,
Oh,
but
come on, man. Don't be that modest. Like,
no,
there's something called
I'll just say
form. It's
this.
no different than shooting a free throw in basketball or a
Mm-hmm.
slap shot in hockey or, the correct driving techniques for like checking your rear view mirrors. There's some principles to apply.
Yep.
There are people that are, bless their heart, I think, are going to just go out and try to yank on that string with their arrow in there, and they're going to point to the sky, or they're going to point at their feet or whatever it is. And that, I'm going to tell you right away, they're doing it wrong, and that weight's way too heavy for that draw.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're, again, archery shops are going to help you, and they're going to identify what is comfortable to pull in a correct form. They're going to say, hey, your elbow's way too low or off, or you want to, have your arm raised up here, or your forearm needs to be a little bit, it's too straight, and the string when it's coming back is going to literally tear blood vessels in your forearm. So
Yep.
um, there is some basic principles, Peter.
The name of the game in archery is repeatability. If you can't repeat the same action almost identically every single time, you're going to have some major variances in accuracy. That is where kind of where I was talking about at the beginning of the episode. That is where archery is so much more difficult and so much more technical than shooting a rifle. Is that I mean, obviously you need repeatability when you're shooting a rifle as well. But with archery, the tiniest difference in movement can completely change the trajectory of that arrow, and it could be a noticeable difference.
Yeah.
And so you just have to really focus on repeatability, finding a system like a checklist or a system that works for you so that you're doing the same thing every single time. And one of the best ways for that to happen is just by doing it and getting muscle memory. Kind of like Chris said, if you can find someone who kind of watch you as you're learning and to give you tips on form, that's super important because it's very easy to develop bad habits. And it's way harder to break a bad habit than it is to develop one. And so if you can, you know, a lot of archery shops will offer archery lessons. I would say that would be money well spent because it will save you a lot of time. It'll save you money in the long run because something that people do a lot, and we're going to talk about mistakes that beginners often make. This would be one of them, is that a lot of the time people will blame their gear instead of blaming maybe themselves or their form.
You can give a military sniper a budget rifle, and he can go out and shoot 1,000 times better than a guy that spent 10 grand on his custom rifle just because he's not making
Because he's skilled,
excuses. He's just not making excuses, right? Like,
right?
and yeah, there's gear, or something might break on your bow, or like those are crazy circumstances. But what we're talking about is you have to put in the time and energy in order to repeat something, in order to have a synthesis of what is actually happening here. And
Mm-hmm.
that shouldn't be in the field.
Right.
You shouldn't be letting your arrows go over and over again at deer coming by, and you keep hitting them in the ass. Sorry for my language, but like if that's happening, I'm telling you, something's not going right. If that is your track record, and you can't blame it on the bow, because the
Yep.
bow is now hitting the deer consistently in the rear.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah, I would say that if for when you start practicing and Don't let pride get in the way, because we all have to start somewhere. And if that means that for you, you need to practice at 20 yards for a couple months just to work on your mechanics, just to work on your form, then so be it. It does not matter the range at which you're shooting. What matters is that you're setting yourself up for success in the future. Once you get that muscle memory down, once you get that consistent form, then you can start stretching out your ranges. But if you start trying to shoot longer distances early on in your archery journey, and you don't have those core basic principles down, your accuracy is going to struggle. You're going to get frustrated, and you might end up quitting archery because it's like, this is dumb. Or like I said before, you might end up spending a bunch of money you didn't need to spend on gear because you're blaming your bow or your release or your sight or any number of these things for ultimately what is just poor form and mechanics. So again, find a mentor, take lessons if you need to. I'd rather you spend money on lessons than on gear that you don't need to buy. um, Anything else you want to add on that, Chris, before we kind of jump to our next section? Awesome. Let's uh let's jump into common mistakes beginners make. Um the I think the first one that comes to mind for me is pulling too much draw weight.
Yeah,
Would you
that's where
agree?
you're. Yeah, I mean, I've been at the range and I've seen guys. I kid you not, nearly pointing at the sun,
Yeah,
trying to draw
trying
their
to pull
bow.
that thing down.
And then I've seen guys at, I don't even know if it's 10 yards. It might be 10 yards, but certainly at 20, and they're the target, I kid you not, is it 4 feet by 4 feet, 5 feet by 5 feet, big
Yeah, they're the big
hay bale size hay.
hail bale.
It's a tongue twister, man. I'm having a tough time. I, but I'm saying that thing is covered in arrows from top to bottom, left to right,
Yep.
and I'm clearly uh, they don't know what they're doing. At 20 yards, you should be nearly Robin Hooding those arrows, bullseyeing those
Your
arrows.
your bow is certainly capable of it.
Heck
Like,
yeah.
yep.
It is totally user errors because a bow is so precise with how you, like, your release. How you're letting the bow, are you holding the bow too tight? Are you turning the bow in your hand a little left or right when you're
Mm-hmm.
releasing, that arrow? Are you flinching? What's your breathing like? Where are your eyes? Are you looking with the wrong eye? Like, I've seen hilarious things happen. I've seen at 20 yards arrows going over the 5x5 target way back to the back of the archery range at 50, 60 yards and disappearing into the weeds. I've seen some crazy things, and I just sometimes I'm like,
Yeah.
do I need help this guy?
You try not to judge, and you don't want to come across as like this person who knows so much, but at the same time it's like, can I just like
Hey
help you with
buddy.
something quick?
Hey buddy,
Like,
I'm
can I give you a pointer here?
I'm by no means an expert, but
Right.
I know you at the end of the day want to be able to bullseye over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going for the I hit the target all over
Right.
uh conclusion there. So
Yeah. So draw weight, too much draw weight is definitely one. Like, if you can't if you can't comfortably pull back a bow over and over again, it's probably too heavy for you. Yeah, I mean, if you have aspirations to pull heavier draw weight, you got to hit the gym, man.
and there
Honestly.
there is fatigue is totally a thing. It's
Yep.
totally a factor, especially when bow hunting, when you're drawing that weight. But what I mean, you should easily, and keep in mind, on the range you are doing the motion over and over again. Part of that is to build that muscle memory and
Mm-hmm.
to tell your body you need these muscles to be toned and ready to go for when you are out in the field. But you know 25 pulls into 50 pulls, it is perfectly normal if you're at a good weight that you can draw to start feeling, I wouldn't say sore right away, but you're going to start feeling it. And then if you're just starting out again and going home, you're going to be sore a little bit maybe the next day or
Yeah.
something after. So you have to you have to understand that when you're drawing your 25th time or your 50th time, you're not in a struggle. It is a gradual fatigue where you
Mm-hmm.
still can easily pull that bow back, but now you've just been working those muscles. It's no different than doing push-ups. So,
Yep. Um, yeah, and I've also found for myself, if I start feeling that fatigue and then I start seeing my group sizes starting to open up a little bit, it's
yep,
probably
that's
time
good.
for that session to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Just because when you're tired and fatigued, a lot of the time that's when bad habits can start to creep in because
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to compensate for that lack of strength just because you've you've been shooting a lot. So I think that's another mistake. When guys go to the range and they do a session and shoot like 100 arrows. Now, if you've been shooting for a like if you're a person who's been shooting for a long time, you're a very experienced archer. Maybe that's just a normal day for you, and that's one
Mm-hmm.
thing. But if you're a beginner, I would not probably recommend doing super long extended sessions
We're
like
not
that.
Olympic archers here, people, where they're
Right.
shooting like all day long because I'm sure they're shooting a ton of arrows for that
Yep.
muscle memory
Getting
and
those reps.
yep.
Yeah. Um,
But you're not going to do that in the field. You honestly,
you get one
you
shot.
might you might have to draw, let's just be crazy. You might have to draw 7 times in the most crazy scenario with a deer like at 40 yards and then it's behind a tree and
You
you're
got to let
waiting for
down.
you're
Yep.
thinking it's going to step out and it stands there for 2 minutes. So you're like, you let down and then
Mm-hmm.
it kind of kitty corners to you and it does kind of a circle, but now there's a bunch of like twigs or brush in the way. Like there are scenarios where you might have to multiple draw, and I said 7 because it is ridiculous. uh, but if that deer is just hanging out and you are being quiet and you are looking for your shot, you might have an anticipation that that deer is going to step into the open, and you draw again and you're like, yep, it's going to happen, and it doesn't happen because the animal's not trying to die. It's not trying to be like, I want to be dinner tonight.
Yep.
um, but that is vastly different than being on the range and drawing 25, 50, 100 times, right? So your fatigue level in the field is going to be far less, and that's why Peter mentioned, when we go out, we shoot max probably 25 times down the range, give or take. We're having conversation because you know we've been blessed to live next to each other for a while. We don't right now, but we had a range right down the street from us that we'd go to and go shoot for half an hour and go back home.
Yep.
And that was a great time.
Yeah. Like as a matter of fact, so just the past few days, I dusted off my bow since last season, and
Oh,
um, there's enough space in my backyard that I can shoot 20 yards with a safe backstop and everything. And so um, I have been shooting between 6 and 12 arrows a day, and that's really all I need. But I'll tell you, after shooting between those 6 and 12 times, I feel it in my back because I haven't used those muscles consistently in that way in quite a while. And so sometimes that's all it takes. And I just focus on having really good, high quality shots. And sometimes more isn't always better. So sometimes it's quality over quantity. So yeah, that would be one of my recommendations and one of the things I see most commonly in terms of mistakes that beginners will make. Chris, do you have any that come to mind?
I think just trying to focus too much on accuracy way down range, like at long distances. You see, like it's cool to shoot far and be accurate,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't shoot far and be accurate if you don't understand your mechanics and being accurate, 20 yards in, because not every animal is going to walk 20 yards in. But if you're just at the range shooting 40s and 50s the whole time, you are not going to have a great exposure to a very close animal.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, in theory, your 20-yard pin should be on. You should be sighting in at the closer range, but I don't know. I think don't try to be cool. Try to be technical and try to understand your equipment and what makes you proficient. So,
You know what's a lot cooler than hitting targets at 40, 50 yards, Chris? Killing deer. That's way cooler. And I would say that the majority of opportunities, and we're talking more specifically whitetail here, but I would say the majority of opportunity that you have in a whitetail deer archer bow hunting is going to be 25 yards and in the majority of the time.
Yeah, I mean, all the deer that have ever crossed me, well, archery hunt with my bow or with a rifle, I have had certain circumstances where they're in 5 yards for me, right under my stand. But I got deer crossing all over me at 30
Yeah.
all the time, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a sweet spot for me
Yeah.
because you're trying to, if you are tree stand hunting, which I'd imagine everyone listening who's does bow hunting, the majority of that is going to be tree stand in Minnesota. You're probably not spot and stalking, but you could be. It's
You could. You
totally a
could.
thing. When you get into the West, that becomes a thing. But 30 is a sweet spot for me.
Mm-hmm.
You should be on some game trails. That's where your stand's going to be. So if you can be accurate there, that's where you should be spending your time.
Yep. Um, One other one that kind of comes to mind is rushing the shot.
Mm.
Trying to make a shot happen. You can't like make a shot happen. You kind of have to let it happen. I don't know if that's a great way to describe it. But sometimes I think we try and
Go to where the elk are. Don't go to where you want them to be. For
I
those
think
of you who
so.
don't know this funny saying, we met a kind old man at a hotel in the
An
middle
old
of
codger.
in one of our middle of our elk hunt, and we were fairly defeated, and he just said this profoundly stupid thing to us. He's like, you got to go to where the elk are, not where you want them to be. And we're like, gee, thanks, buddy. That's you rocket scientist.
But but anyway, I think we try and force shots, and with archery, you really can't do that. There's a million things that can go wrong. There's less forgiveness in archery than there is with a firearm, just plain and simple. And so yeah, let the opportunity, let the shot come to you, and just execute a really good shot. Be patient. There's a lot of the time there is no rush. Most of the time there's no rush. Just
Mhm.
just be patient. And then final one, I think I'll mention neglecting practicing in hunting conditions. They can be hard to replicate, and I understand that it
Yeah,
can be
you're gonna go out
hard.
and shoot in the rain.
Right. I understand that it can be hard to shoot in hunting conditions, especially like your tree stand hunting. It's not the most convenient thing in the world to go set up a tree stand and then go set up a target and then shoot at the target from your tree stand. But if you think about it, if all you do is go to an archery range, a perfectly flat archery range, and you're shooting at manicured distances from anywhere from 20 to 60 yards, it's set up perfectly for you. That is just not reality in the hunting woods. Your deer are not going to be at perfect tens of yards. They're going to be at 22 yards. They're going to be at 37 yards, 43 yards. It's never going to be quite perfect. So you need to practice those types of shots. You can't just practice at 40. You got to be like, okay, what does my arrow do if I use a 40 pin and I'm shooting at a target that's 43 yards away? How do I have to compensate for that?
Mm-hmm.
These are the types of things you got to practice. And then if you can shoot from an elevated position, that's also a really great skill because you have to think about your arrow's trajectory. It's not just shooting flat. If you're shooting at an angle, you have to think about where that arrow's entering the animal and then where that's possibly going to exit the animal. You can't just think of it from a horizontal plane. It's a different ball game altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if you're hunting on foot and let's say there's a deer 50 yards away up a hill, shooting uphill is also very, very different than shooting on flat ground. So those are the things you got to take into consideration. You have to kind of apply them to your context. What are possible situations you're going to run into in your hunting spot? And practice those things because it's going to equip you to have more success in the field. Yep, yep, yep. All right, Chris. Let's. Where do people go if they want to learn more about archery
They go to
about
Ready Set
bow
Hunt.
hunting.
They go to readysethunt.org, baby. Just go to your local archery shop. Start there.
Yep.
Those guys do it all day long, and they'll give you good advice.
Yep.
Hopefully.
If you want to learn a more technical side of archery, there's a lot of stuff on YouTube. Whether it comes to arrow construction or different releases, like we mentioned before, different sights, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of information out there that's really good. Um, and I would also say, if you can find a hunting mentor, if you know someone who bow hunts and you want to learn the ropes, ask if you can tag along with them on a hunt. Maybe you don't even bring a bow, maybe you don't hunt at all, but you're just observing and seeing what they do. Go to an archery range with them, see how they practice, see what they do, watch their form, have them watch your form. Make some friends in an archery range. I've met a lot of interesting people at the archery range. Some of them not so great archers, some of them really good archers, and just strike up a conversation. And it makes going to the archery range, especially if you're going to like a public archery range or something, if you're living in more of a metro area, it makes going to the archery range that much more fun, is when there's people there that you know, and maybe you see them once a week or something. But yeah, just kind of try and create a little archery community. Anything I missed there, Chris?
I don't think so.
All right, well, let's wrap it up. What are our key takeaways, Chris? Summarize real quick, Chat GPT style.
Practice. Make sure you're fitted for your equipment, and you get some advice on your form. And don't try to be a hero. Let it come to you. Like, enjoy. There's a peace and a pacefulness to bow hunting. So I think and be safe. As always, be safe. Seek advice, seek mentorship, and know your regulations. But archery hunting is not. You don't get a follow up. It's not like you have a follow up shot or two with extra rounds in the rifle.
You get one shot.
When you let that arrow go, it's going to do some damage, and it's important to be ethical on that. So you want to know. You want to be good.
You got to be ready
accurate
to blood trail that deer too. That's a whole other topic for a different time. But yeah,
I think
man,
I lost
becoming Legolas. That's us.
Did you freeze on me. I think you froze on me.
This is a super fun episode, Chris. I'm excited to do more. Gosh,
practice safety, ethical hunting. Next episode, we're probably gonna. I don't know what we're gonna talk about next episode, but I don't even know if this is still recording. I hope everyone's having a great day. It's springtime. So right now, I am by myself. It looks like I lost Peter, but this is probably still recording. It is. Well, yeah. Thanks for listening, everyone. Next time, I think this is accurate, but we'll be doing some gear reviews. I don't think that's accurate. There's no way. Like, subscribe, submit questions. We'd love to do some Q&A soon with some of those questions across our socials. So thanks, everyone, and have a great day.